There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Matthew. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And so now after these disciples, after their hearts are exposed, Jesus, He doesn't do what they say. But now He turns around to this woman and He tells her that He wasn't sent to the Gentiles, that He was only sent to the lost sheep, to the house of Israel. And so now you have this woman, and she has just been denied. And what she doesn't argue with Him. She doesn't plead with Him of why He should heal her daughter. And she doesn't call Him names. She doesn't call Him a racist. What she does is she worships Him. And then after she worships Him, she prays. And her prayer is a lot like Peter's prayer that we read last week. Just 3 little words. It's, Lord, help me. And so then after this and after her prayer, what Jesus does is He calls her a dog. And the Jews, they always called Gentiles dogs. But this isn't Israel. This isn't their own country. But this area still is mixed with Gentiles and Jews. And this woman, she's been called a dog before. And it might be a little hard for us to realize that Jesus called her a dog. And you might think in your mind, well, is Jesus a little bit racist? But she doesn't turn around and she doesn't say, I don't think I heard you right. Did you just call me what I thought you called me? You didn't just call me a dog. But the truth is, Jesus didn't use the same word for dog that the Jews used for calling Gentiles dogs. The Jews, when they called somebody a dog, they called them the garbage-eating curs that were vicious, that would roam the streets, and they would attack anything they'd see. Jesus, all He did is He called her a little household dog. He called her a pet dog, the kind of dog that would sit on the master's lap. And then what Jesus says, that would have been understood by anybody in any culture, because nobody would ever take the bread away from their little children and go feed the pet dogs with the children's bread and leave their children hungry with no food. And this woman, she also understood that the Jews were the children of God and that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, that He was sent to the Jews. And even though Jesus has healed Gentiles before, He has never healed Gentiles in a Gentile country. And I think here, Jesus, He doesn't want to be misunderstood, as if He had left the Jews and now He's going to the Gentiles, that His mission to Israel was over. But even here again, this woman, she doesn't argue with Jesus. She accepted her place. She knew that she wasn't one of the children of Israel, and that she wasn't entitled to any miracle from Him. And this woman, she understands that Jesus has a special calling to the Jews, and she didn't want to take anything away from them. She didn't want to take anything away from the children of Israel. And so then what she does is she just acknowledges, yeah, I'm just a little dog. I'm not a Jew. And she can't change her race. But even so, she still calls Jesus Lord again. And now she says, I'm just asking for the crumbs, for those crumbs that the children don't want, just the stuff that falls on the floor. So she's not wanting to take anything away from the children, but she just wants a little blessing alongside of them. And then Jesus says she has great faith. And this is the second person that Jesus has ever said that had great faith. The first person that he said had great faith was the centurion when he healed the centurion's servant. And now it's this woman. And if you notice, both of them were Gentiles. And both of them were not asking for anything for themselves. They were both asking for something for somebody else. They were asking for something for someone they loved. And so I don't think Jesus, that he used any harsh tones when he talked to this woman, when he was speaking to her. And I also believe that Jesus intended to heal this woman's daughter all along. In fact, I believe that's the only reason that he's even up there. And that this whole dialogue was to draw out this woman's confession of faith. And I believe that Jesus, that he wanted to do this miracle in front of his disciples, because this was going to be the kind of people that they would be ministering to. They would be just like this woman. They would be idolatrous Gentiles who were lost. And the way you can prove that this is the whole reason that Jesus went up there to Tyre and Sidon to meet this one woman is because that's the only person he healed up there. The only person he healed up there was her daughter. And after he heals the daughter, he goes back down into Israel, into the area of the Decapolis, which is 10 cities. Well, that's what Decapolis means, 10 cities. And so now he goes back down into Israel, but now they're not on the western part of Israel, on the western part of the Sea of Galilee. They're on the eastern side, which is mainly all made up of Gentiles, even though it was Jewish. And so now Jesus, he's healing all these Gentiles. And again, the multitudes are gathering around him, and they're bringing everybody who's sick, maimed, mute, lame, blind. And again, Jesus, he's healing all of them. And it says that these Gentiles are amazed. And it doesn't say that they went and they glorified their gods, but it says that they're glorifying the God of Israel because they've never seen anything like this. And so now Jesus, he remains with these people for 3 days, and they've used up all their food reserves. In this case, we're told that he's in the wilderness. In fact, they're up in the mountains, and that there is no town nearby to get any food. And they've traveled very far to go see Jesus. And of course, they were very glad to do that because they stayed a very long time. And what you need to see here is that Jesus, he loves these people just as much as he loves the Jews. And he didn't want to send them away hungry or weak. And again, it says that Jesus has compassion for the multitude. And he uses that same word that he used the last time when he said he had compassion when he fed the 5,000 Jews. And that word meant that he was moved inward in his inward parts, which again, it means this is much more than just having sympathy. Because Jesus, he feels the same way about these Gentile crowds as he felt toward the Jewish crowds, those ones that wanted to make Jesus the bread king. And so here again, it's Jesus is the one who says he doesn't want to send them away hungry. And then his disciples, they say to him, well, where can we get enough bread in the wilderness? And you have to think, well, don't you remember last week you fed the 5,000? And you would think that these guys would start to get it. And then there's these commentaries, and these are not the good commentaries, but there are commentaries, and they'll say that the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000, that it's the same event, it's just being mentioned twice. And they say that's because the feeding of the 4,000, it isn't mentioned in all the four Gospels like the feeding of the 5,000, that this is only mentioned in Matthew and in Mark. But there's a lot of differences between the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. And the first one is very obvious. It's 1,000 people. There's 1,000 people. And this one, it also occurred on the east side. And it didn't occur by the cities. It occurred in the mountains in the wilderness. And with the 5,000, it was primarily Jews. And the word that they used for baskets in the feeding of the 5,000 is a different word for basket that they use here. And that word for basket with the feeding of the 5,000, that was a smaller Jewish basket. And it's a basket that's made and it tapers up to the top because it has a small hole on the top. And that's because of the Jews' purity rules for food. But the word for basket used here with the feeding of the 4,000, this is a large basket, and it actually looks more like a mat with just kind of like a little flare around it, like a little lip. And that's the kind of baskets that the Gentiles used. And then in the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus, he divided up 5 loaves and 2 small fish. And the leftovers that the disciples gathered was 12 baskets. But here with the 4,000, they started with 7 loaves and a few fish. And then they had 7 baskets left over. But what the similarities between these two events is that everybody, they overate, and that everybody was filled. And that's the truth. With Jesus, he can always satisfy us all. So after the feeding of the 4,000, Jesus, he leaves the east side of the Galilee and he travels to the town of Magdala. And Magdala is the town where Mary Magdalene was from, which is on the northwest side of the Galilee. And now we hear for the first time that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they have come together to test Jesus. And them coming together against Jesus, it shows us how much they consider Jesus to be a threat to them. Because you see, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were enemies. Their views on everything they believed were opposite. And the Sanhedrin, the 70, the ruling council in Israel that was in Jerusalem, they were made up of both Pharisees and Sadducees, both of these parties. But the only thing that bound these two parties together here was their fear and their hatred toward Jesus. Now, the Pharisees, they weren't a political party. They could live under any governmental rule as long as they were left alone to be able to practice their views of religion. But the Sadducees, they were political. And they were also the aristocrats. I've seen the movie just too many times, but they were the aristocrats of Israel's society, but they were the people of power and of wealth. And so these guys, they made deals with the Romans to be able to keep their power and their wealth. So the Pharisees, they would have been considered to have been the conservatives because these guys, they believed in all of the Old Testament scriptures. And the party itself was made up of any male Jew who wanted to follow their way of life and their teachings. But these people, they were also the legalists. And their rabbis, they were the ones who had made up these rules upon rules for everybody to follow. They burdened the people with rules. But they also believed in miracles, and they believed in angels, and they also believed in a resurrection. Where the Sadducees, they believed in none of that. They believed the exact opposite. They didn't believe in miracles, and they didn't believe in angels, and they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me, though I'm blind. He helps me see, though I see dimly. In this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.